You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, one half of this morbid equation. And I'm joined by my co-host and actual brother, Dave White. Hey, Dave, how you doing over there?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing pretty well. I'll tell you, I have found a new thing I enjoy, and it is videos of people falling down. And I was never really one for these types of videos, and now I just cannot get enough of them. I don't know if it's just the way the world these days, but God damn it, I just like a video of someone falling down a hill.
I can't fault you for that. It's objectively funny.
Yeah. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. Like, you know,
nobody can get hurt.
It's just kind of hilarious.
Just a nice little slip and fall.
Just a light tumble.
Maybe throw a banana peel down there.
That's the best I got. It's been that kind of fucking week.
Yeah, no, I get you. I get you. So, hey, Dave. Who's this over here?
Well, you see, we have a guest, but we do not have just any guest. We have us a writer, an actor, director, world-renowned drag performer, and gal about town. Why, it is Peaches Christ. Hi, Peaches.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this is very exciting. We've been looking forward to this one for a little while, and I'm so glad that you joined us for this movie in particular, because man, we're gonna have a good time with this one.
I am excited. I have to say that Dave's hobby is an old time passion of mine, and when you really go down the rabbit hole, you'll find Instagram pages like Kids Getting Hurt, and I highly recommend you follow Kids Getting Hurt or America's Got No Talent.
I feel like Kids Getting Hurt is something that gets you on like a no-fly list.
Yeah.
Though.
I got in a lot of trouble once on Twitter because I made a joke about when I used to work. Remember when I used to work at that fucking pizza and birthday party place, and it was
vaguely
nothing but children. I used to take great pleasure. It was a very high pressure job for such low pay, and so it's so terrible. And I used to take great pleasure when a kid would just go running through and trip. Oh man, it warmed things up for me in a way.
I mean, I'll say this: the caveat is they're not seriously hurt. You only make it on Kids Getting Hurt on Instagram if it's sort of all ending in laughter.
That's good.
So there you have it. Peaches Christ, not pro children getting hit by cars. Definitely pro children falling down, though.
Yes, exactly.
That I get.
Falling down, safely.
Yeah. Let's keep it all above board as long as everybody's having a good time. Kids falling down. It's a great time.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for our Kids Falling Down podcast.
Yep, coming soon to Patreon. God. Yeah. So, hey, we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. So just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod, and Dave's over there at That Queer Wolf. We've got a sweet website now at bringmetheaxe.com. You can listen to all our past shows there and read the transcripts if that's the sort of thing you're into. And if you don't know, we have another show called 99 Cent Rental, where we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that Bring Me the Axe is off. Our latest episode, covering John Waters' Polyester, is out now. And we'll be back next week with a look at Brian De Palma's rock opera, Phantom of the Paradise. And you can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. Now, lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Just search for us by name. Subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a big favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I got to tell you, I see the number going up, and it really warms my heart, and it brightens my day. I love it. So keep doing that. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor, give the episode a like and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. We're always talking at you on Instagram, so drop us a line. Just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show, because I'm about to give you a taste of what we're doing tonight. Here's a taste.
What would you do if you accidentally discovered the house next door was occupied by something not human? Something horrifying. something unspeakably evil. No one believes you.
Mom, I didn't have a nightmare.
Not your mom.
They did kill a girl over there.
Not your girlfriend.
Charlie, is this some sort of a trick to get me back?
Not even the police.
Look, I know it's crazy. I know that, but look, Lieutenant!
It knows that you know. You'll do anything to protect yourself, but it will do anything to protect its secret. Fright Night. If you love being scared, this could be the night of your life.
Guys, a lot of staccato sound there.
That is a sharp, loud trailer. Yeah, Fright Night this is a movie that when I think about 80s horror, this is one of the first titles that comes to mind. And I don't necessarily...
It's also quintessentially 80s.
It is firmly planted right there in the middle of it all, 1985. Yeah, it's a favorite of mine. I watch it fairly frequently, you know.
I love this film. When you threw out some titles for possible collaboration on your show, this was the one I was hoping I would get. And I think for all the reasons you say, it's very, very 80s. It's very stylish. It's fun. It's also scary. You know, it has so many qualities that make for a great movie. But in addition to that, it's got sort of this weird underlying queerness, both in terms of its cast and its subject matter, that just make it, just when you look at queer horror, quote unquote, which is kind of a new thing that people started to look at. There is a specific reason that a bunch of us were really drawn to Fright Night. You know, it is a handsome pair of men, move in next door to a very attractive and cute teenager who's dating a lesbian and is best friends with a gay guy. It's just a really, queer movie that's just a lot of fun. Not to mention Roddy McDowall. I didn't even,
Yeah. It's super. It's some of the research material that I went over while I was doing this is a lot of stuff of like Tom Holland saying like this movie is not meant to be campy, but it really is. It's like super campy.
Yeah, he also says that that all of the queerness is unintentional, and I find that very hard to believe.
I find that very hard to believe too.
And we'll get to a point where I'm pretty sure he shows his hand, but it is so explicitly gay at certain points. I mean, there's the undertones are obviously there throughout the whole thing, and it kind of makes me wonder: does Tom Holland see queerness as sort of an extension of, or as a part of, sort of an intrinsic part of the vampire legend in general? Or is he doing this, very intentionally? Because my God, you have stacked your cast with gay men and women. You have got a scene after scene of just innuendo, and just to say, it's sort of like when George Romero says, "Well, I cast the best actor. I had no intentions when I cast a black man." It's like, sure you didn't, but also you kind of did a little bit too. Like this feels a little bit intentional, not in a bad way. I think it's pretty neutral in terms of what. To think about
there's certainly no judgment cast in it, and it's not used in like a shocking way either. It's just. There is something about there is an inherent sexuality about vampires,
right?
And like there's like not really talking about the Lost Boys. The other sort of 80s vampire movie that comes to mind that is pure sexuality is The Hunger, which just puts everything sort of front and center. There's nothing really. Well, actually, no.
Well, that's because The Hunger, they were like, here's the hottest people we could find. They're all gonna fuck each other.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's unavoidable, but. The queerness of it, has to have been a sort of deliberate element to it, regardless of what Holland says.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that it was that unintentional when you really add it all up. But part of me goes, okay, well, maybe, because there's this sort of part of, you have to look at all the people who worked on the movie, right? It's, of course, Tom Holland is the director and, the buck stops with them. But really, when you look at something like A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, and you go down the rabbit hole of Mark Patton, having kind of his life and career sort of destroyed by this experience, and you watch that movie and you go, well, it's undeniably using queerness, and homophobia as a sort of a weapon of fear, as far as the teenage boys who were buying tickets to, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. And then you find out the director, I believe, was really oblivious, but the writer wasn't. And the production designer wasn't. And the casting director wasn't. So you kind of go, like, the more I see those interviews with, what's his name, Jack, what's his shoulder? I'm like, oh yeah, I could buy that. You were totally oblivious to all this while shooting, Bob Shea in a leather outfit,
Yeah.
Well, and I think he seems remorseful too. Like, he seems, once it was sort of brought to his attention, he seems like he really did kind of feel bad. He did not mean to set out to sort of destroy someone's career or make anyone feel bad. And I think I guess I would buy, maybe this is the sum of the parts in terms of Fright Night, in which Tom Holland may have been oblivious, and maybe, he's sort of a non-judgmental guy in general. And so it just didn't occur to him. And now that he sees it, he thinks it's great. But everybody else on this is sort of like, they were just doing what they do.
I don't necessarily buy the oblivious part of it, because he was tight with Roddy McDowall.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, we go through it again on Child's Play a few years later. So like, he was definitely at least, queer adjacent.
I mean, he's friends with Roddy McDowall, right? They worked together, and probably were friends even beforehand with Class of 1984, which I actually just watched for the first time. I'd never seen
it. Really?
Yeah.
It's great.
It's wild. Yeah. I don't know. There's just some of these movies that you're supposed to have seen, and you've never seen them. And the longer you go, you just have never seen it. So finally, Fright Night, not Fright Night, Night Flight. The app put Class of 1984 on for this month, so I was like, I'm going to watch it. And I didn't even realize that Roddy was in it until he showed up. I think I remembered. But Tom Holland, did he write that movie, or he produced that movie?
He wrote that one,
He wrote it.
And so with Fright Night, it's like, I don't think Amanda nor Stephen Jeffries, I don't think they were out of the closet. So, and then you've got, handsome Susan Sarandon and Chris Sarandon. Oh my God, I'm really a mess today. This is what drag queens do. We change the names of everyone. We make them, all different. But it's sort of like, maybe he really, and then like you say, he goes on to work with Don Mancini in the next big movie he does. Maybe he just was accidentally surrounded by queers.
under
I'm
under their terrible gay spell.
Well, is Tom Holland queer?
That's true.
Okay.
No, he's not. I believe he's married to a woman.
Yeah, but for a long time I was under the impression that he was, and I don't know why. And I think maybe I was just confusing him with Don Mancini. So that's entirely.
And I always thought Chris Sarandon was gay, probably because of this. And I never made the connection. Chris Sarandon was married to Susan Sarandon. I didn't really put that together until, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. But I think because of this movie and because of Dog Day Afternoon, in which he also plays, well, I wouldn't say also, but he plays a queer character in that. In this, I think he just comes across as that, because he is a very handsome man. He's very graceful and kind of elegant in the way he portrays this character, and I think the way he portrays a lot of characters. And I think it just, to me, especially when I'm seeing this as a younger person, you're looking for anything that looks remotely gay, and it was just like, oh yeah, that guy, totally, that makes sense.
It's just got to be the vampire thing. Like, have you ever watched the TV show of What We Do in the Shadows?
Yes,
because there's an ambiguity of the sort of gender and sexuality in that one that I think that they're really clamping onto, where it's just like, it's not really sexuality, it's just sex, so there's the preference is completely beside the point. It's just the sexuality of the vampire as a concept.
Vampires seem to be the queerest of the monsters, but also sexually ambiguous, or poly or pansexual, whatever. They're just sexual and horny, and
they've been around for so long that like eventually you're just gonna get bored. Things.
they can seduce you, right?
And thank God, because they're the human looking ones. I guess we kind of win out in that. Like, we don't get to see the gill man having sex with another gill man.
Zombies.
Well, that's what one thing I really love about Fright Night is they take the attractive vampire sexual, trope, and then we still get a monster movie in the third act. I love that in this world, the vampires can become these incredibly ridiculous monsters. I mean, oh God, Amanda Bierce, when she turns with that giant, mouth and everything.
Oh, the shark mouth.
It's fabulous, and Stephen Jeffries, when he becomes the monster version of Evil Ed. It's just, I love that Fright Night gives us both. And, I never really thought about it, but you're right to sort of position it or talk about things like The Hunger and The Lost Boys, because God, the 80s were great. In general for horror, but once again, I mean, some of the best vampire movies, wildly different vampire movies. Because now I'm thinking about Near Dark, another 80s vampire film that's just incredible.
Each one of them's a little different, like a different kind of vibe to it. Like Near Dark is probably my favorite of the 80s vampire movies, just because that's the kind of vampire that I really like, is just this kind of like predatory menace that must be destroyed. And like that one, they're not sexy at all. They're horrible like creatures.
Yeah.
Well, you also get the influence too of the growing popularity of the kind of, I guess, punk culture, goth culture, and you see, you see that people are allowed to be. It's not the Bela Lugosi or stuff from the '60s, Christopher Lee. You get this kind of edgy sexiness that you get in the '80s from stuff, the influence of like Susie and the Banshees and sort of that big British punk culture. And you get, in who made Near Dark? Penelope Spheres?
Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Catherine Bigelow. But you still get that that kind of early LA punk 80s kind of like dirty,
all that's
punk, but a little bit of
it was so there's like, I look at it, this is going to sound obnoxious, but I'm Gen X. I'm officially 50 years old. So for me the 80s were formative. I was born in the 70s, but I came of age in the 80s. I loved all that music you just mentioned, and I think that gritty goth era that was a fusion of punk rock, but also the new romantics and new wave. It all came together and created this sort of soup of style that was just so great. But by the time you get to the 90s, I have to say, it's commodified, and you've got stores like Hot Topic and malls, and the quintessential goth characters in every movie, and it's kind of this sort of stereotype and kind of boring, with the exception of maybe Winona Ryder showing up in something. It in the 80s, it still was cool. It was pure. The Lost Boys with all those adamant, kind of jackets and looks and the buttons.
Oh God, the costuming in that movie is great.
Fabulous.
And we actually we watched, so after we watched this the other night, we also watched Lost Boys.
Oh yeah,
because I wanted to see some. Well, actually, we watched this, and then we watched American Werewolf, and then we watched Lost Boys, because what I wanted to see was what is the sort of trajectory of the, I don't want to say horror comedy, but definitely comedic horror, because there's a tone to Fright Night and I don't think it always works throughout this movie. I ended up having a lot of kind of complicated feelings, I guess, this time around. So I think what Fright Night is trying to do is what Lost Boys does very, very well, which balances comedy and horror. And I don't think it works quite so well in this. But what I think is really interesting is you get a kind of goofy version of it in Fright Night. And then by like 87, I think it was Lost Boys, then it's really edgy and it's really cool. But it was just interesting to see the trajectory, because I think a lot of what doesn't quite work so well here definitely does work there. And I think it all kind of comes back to American Werewolf, which is kind of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
which is like they're still cool.
American Werewolf is the best of the best, I feel like, in my mind. But Lost Boys, I think, is so good. Revisited it recently also. But how funny that we're talking about Tom Holland making this uber gay, almost borderline silly, but super fun gay vampire movie. And then Joel Schumacher, the silliest gay guy in Hollywood, making, a more straight dude version of Fright Night.
A man who worked with Halston makes this very, very masculine movie. It's like,
I'll never not think about that. Like, Tom Holland made Fright Night and Joel Schumacher made The Lost Boys. Speaking of The Lost Boys, I have to tell you, because you might get a kick out of this, it will be, it's going to happen, I'm sure, before this episode airs. So apologies to the listeners. But this Friday, I'm actually doing an event.
Oh, yes.
This
sounds awesome.
The Red Room Orchestra, which is a local music group here in San Francisco, is doing the soundtrack to The Lost Boys, and I'm acting out scenes as Jamie Gertz and also Diane Wiest.
Yes.
And Tim Capello is going to be there playing the saxophone, and he, of course, is the sexy saxophone guy. And they've got oh my God, what's his name? Bill and Ted, Alex Winter. Yeah, Alex is going to be there as well. So it's this total like Lost Boys, concert celebration happening on Friday night. This thought you should know. And of course, Fright Night, which is the topic at hand, I have celebrated many, many times at my Midnight Mass event over the years, and have actually had 2 shows with Stephen Jeffries that were almost about 20 years apart. The first one I did with Stephen was about 20 years ago, and then we did another one this past spring where I reached out to Stephen and he joined me again. And so Steven, of course, I adore because he's Evil Ed, but also I just think, I feel like Steven's one of those talented 80s actors who didn't get a fair shake, has a similar story like Mark Patton's, where he couldn't both be gay and be a teen successful young actor in Hollywood. His roommates, just to give you a sense of the trajectory he was on, his roommates when they made Heaven Help Us were Sean Penn and Susan Sarandon's other husband, Tim. What's his name? Tim Robbins.
Oh my God.
Tim Robbins, Sean Penn, Stephen Jeffries. They shared an LA apartment together. Stephen Jeffries had this huge career, that he was launching, and was a very talented actor. I mean, you can't not see it when you watch Fright Night.
Especially in this.
He's amazing.
He delivers a performance that is bizarre, but also very moving.
Oh my God, yes,
fabulous. Yeah, unique, and then boom, he finds that he's not accepted as a queer person, and falls into a lot of drug addiction, and ends up doing adult films, and struggles to stay relevant. So I root for those people. I just love Steven so much.
Oh yeah. Here, hold that thought. Let's do some facts on this one.
Okay.
So the year was 1985. So some other movies released in 1985: Cemetery of Terror by Bring Me the Ex favorite Ruben Galindo Jr. Also that year, The Peanut Butter Solution.
Don't think
I haven't seen that.
we did an episode on that one.
Oh, really?
It's a bizarre Canadian
it's
movie.
A Canadian children's movie that is horrific.
Oh, hilarious.
Yep. Also that year, Evils of the Night. Are you guys familiar with this one?
No.
So super low budget piece of garbage. It's got Julie Newmar in it, and it has John Carradine, who would be in anything.
Yeah, John Carradine would be in
literally. The way that I describe it on Letterboxd is it's like a porno, but they left out all the fucking.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable.
So it's just bad acting.
Unbelievable piece of garbage. It's on Tubi. I sort of recommend it just to see what it's unbelievably weird. Also, Day of the Dead came out that year.
Oh, okay.
And rounding it out, Silver Bullet. Stephen King. Listen to our Silver Bullet.
1985. And those are like the most notable horror movies?
No, those are just the ones that we haven't mentioned on the show yet.
Okay, because I was going to say, like, God, this is the heyday, right? I know 84 is, I think, Nightmare on Elm Street, and also maybe Poltergeist, or maybe Poltergeist
was in 82.
82.
But
Okay.
Nightmare on Elm Street was 84. Nightmare 2 came out this year also. This was the year that they were kind of the competing horror movies, and I believe this one actually outperforms it. So as we mentioned, the director is a man named Tom Holland, and this is his first feature director gig.
And I dare say, I think it shows a little bit.
I think it is.
Wow, Dave, you're a tough critic.
I say this. I think it is tight as hell.
I was going to say for a first director,
but here's the thing.
Yeah,
this was not his first time as a director, because he'd done like literally hundreds of TV commercials prior to this.
Yeah,
before he was even a writer. So he's also an actor. He's also a writer. He'd written a few pictures, turned out quite well. Like we said, he wrote Class of 1984, which we'll probably cover on 99 Cent Rental at some point. He also wrote Psycho 2, which I watched last night. I love it.
I love Psycho 2.
Yep. Way better than you're expecting it to be.
Yeah, it's so underrated. Although I think it's getting a what do they call that when something's valued over time? Anyway, a reevaluation. Yeah, exactly. So, but it is so good. But I like Psycho 2 from the day it came out. Yeah, as a kid. I mean,
it sounds like it was a horrible experience for pretty much everyone who wasn't Anthony Perkins.
Right.
But otherwise, it worked out great for us.
So he Michael Winner, as we mentioned in our Sentinel episode, was a real piece of garbage, and he directed one of Holland's scripts, a movie called Scream for Help, and the way that it came out pissed off Holland so badly that he decided that he would direct his next script to see it done right, and so he takes it to it pretty well. Now, a few years later,
I am firmly anti Michael Winner.
Yeah, Michael Winner, 2 thumbs down.
Huge piece of shit.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's official. We all hate Michael Winner.
Oh, we are in agreement. Yeah.
I will, whatever you guys think, I'm going to adopt that as a philosophy.
Careful.
You tell me who to hate.
Yeah. So a few years later, he delivers one of the genre's biggest, most enduring hits, Child's Play.
Yeah. What year was that?
87 or
88?
Oh my God. I remember seeing that in the theater. Like going to see it, thinking it was going to be more like a Fright Night type movie.
Nope.
I actually had a conversation about that movie with my therapist a couple hours
Really?
ago.
It was a lot. I'll say this. It was a lot. That first Child's Play was a lot darker and bleaker than I expected as a 12 or 13-year-old going into the cinema.
Yeah, she said it was the movie that she was terrified of it when she saw it on TV, probably as a child. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I remember seeing that on TV at the time.
No, that was one that we definitely came around to on video, because when that one came out, like I wicked wanted to see it, but I didn't even bring it up because.
What's the age difference between you two?
6 years.
6
years. Oh, that's a pretty big difference when you're looking at movies as kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to see that one in the theater so badly, but I never even brought it up. Like, Mom would never have taken me to that. But she did take me to Monkey Shines, which is...
Oh, did she?
Which is similarly
That's hilarious. Oh, I was sneaking into all this stuff.
Lucky you.
You know, it was back in the days of, sure, I'm going to see such and such a movie. And then, of course, because back then you could really just buy a ticket and then just, with the multiplexes of the 80s, you could kind of just jump around, especially if you were a kid,
Yeah.
No one really cared.
Yeah.
There was no assigned seating or checking, usually it was one usher at the top of a long hallway or something, and you could kind of,
And that usher was 17 years old.
Yeah, knew exactly what you were doing, So Tom Holland, I did not see Fright Night in the theater. I know that. That was definitely something I saw on video.
I remember riding. We lived in a small town when this one came out, called Marblehead. It's down there next to Salem, Massachusetts. And we had a 2-screen movie theater, and I remember that this was one of them. I would ride by and fucking look at that poster because it's a very evocative poster.
Mm-hmm.
The Fright Night poster. Oh, I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the, obviously 80s poster art, the one sheets, some of them are real works of art. I mean, in my living room to this day, I have my Dream Warriors poster framed.
Oh, yes.
From when I was a kid, and I got the one sheet, from the back of Fangoria magazine. This is the height of brilliant artwork, and I would say Fright Night is in my top 5, of just brilliant poster art. So much so, I'll have to send it to you guys, but we did a Peaches Christ t-shirt of me above the Castro Theater where I do all my shows.
That's awesome.
It's me as the cloud vampire. I'll send it to you all, and maybe you can share it with your listeners. But that's how obsessed I was. We did this all over T-shirt of Peaches as the Fright Night poster art.
That's great.
Yeah, it is iconic. I think it's probably, I think just not just my personal top 5. I think it is probably one of the best, most iconic from like the video store shelves. This was one that really jumps out at you because it's whimsical in a weird way, but it is also terrifying because it does have that shark mouth vampire on it. And it is evocative of so many things. And I don't know that it really accurately represents the movie, but I don't care because it looks awesome.
And the thing is I've got a note about this way down, towards the bottom of the show run, but that appliance that they made was like a last minute thing that Holland came up with, where he was like, it'd be really awesome if she had this thing. Can you guys make it? And the special effects guys were like, you fucking crazy. Like, we're almost done with this movie.
Yeah. Cause they had like 2 days.
And they're like, we have no money. Like, this is this thing. He's like, just do it for me. And they did it and they fucking hated it. And I guess most of them hate it to this day, but it's like one of the most enduring images of the entire movie. So
wait, who hated it? The actors hated wearing it, or the filmmakers hated the look of it?
The effects technicians, the guys who actually made the mouth and put it on Amanda Bierce, like they thought it looked like crap. And like they're behind the scenes, they're on the set, they see it, like they don't actually see the finished product, but like when it came out, like I see that image more than I see Chris Sarandon, and whenever you see references to this movie, like in magazines, and books and stuff,
it was fabulous. I mean, that was one of the things I loved so much about the third act of the film was all those crazy ass wild prosthetics.
Right, it's a very effects light movie until that third act turn, and then all of a sudden it's awesome.
Yeah.
So here's some cast. We got the star of the show is Chris Sarandon, making his second Bring Me the Axe appearance, first being the Sentinel. Mm-hmm. Listen to our Sentinel episode. It took a lot to get him to play a role in a horror movie, since the Sentinel left such a bad taste in his mouth, to put things mildly. I suspect that he and Holland saw eye to eye, having both been abused by Michael Winner. And he's awesome. Jerry Dandridge is one of my favorite horror movie vampires of all time.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone
Nobody
else.
I could not see anybody. He's perfect in this movie. We also get William Ragsdale, which is Charlie Brewster. And this lands real early in his career. I think this is one of his very first roles, like, period.
I think it's his first. You get Herman's head later on. That's all I remember him from.
What's weird about this is I constantly confuse him with Zach Galligan.
From Gremlins?
From Gremlins. They
I
kind
agree.
of look alike.
Very much so. They had a very similar, maybe, and even the kind of the iconic characters they played in Fright Night and in Gremlins have a similar, like, can't believe this is happening, teenage boy with a girlfriend, type vibe going on in suburban America.
It's that horror in the suburbs thing that's got to throw me a little bit. But Ragsdale is still quite active today. He had a cameo in Renfield just last year. And like a lot of people figured in these Bring Me the Axe episodes, he did a ton of TV. And then not necessarily rounding things out, but just kind of keeping it quick, we got Roddy McDowall, prolific actor of stage and screen, known for several roles, including this movie's Peter Vincent, but also as Octavian in Cleopatra, and most importantly, well, for most of us, as Cornelius in Planet of the Apes. To say nothing of the...
He's also in the Poseidon Adventure and my favorite episode of The Twilight Zone.
And also The Legend of Hell House. He came in to this movie because of the part that he plays in Class of 1984. And this is to say nothing of the co-stars Stephen Jeffries and Amanda Bierce. They had both just done a movie called Fraternity Vacation together, which I've never seen. But Jeffries was a Tony-nominated actor before he even got to Hollywood, where he stayed fairly busy until 1989, and then he vanishes, reappearing in the 90s under the alias Sam Ritter in a rather prolific career turn toward porn, appearing in movies with titles like Das Butt, Oklahoma, and I Dream of Weenie.
Oh, wow.
I think all of those are fantastic titles.
Yep.
I love I Dream of Weenie.
Well, I thought Oklahoma was pretty great too.
You know what?
Yeah.
They sound almost, if it wasn't porno in nature, they almost sound like Troy McClure movies.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say Christopher Guest.
I found these on these titles on an article called "The Films of Stephen Jeffries from Top to Bottom."
Of course.
Oh,
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Steven is like, obviously, and you know, I don't think that I don't think it's that private that he, you know, had a pretty severe drug habit. And, you know, I think much like Mark Patton, there was sort of this sense, well, at least getting to know him and befriending him, there's this real tragic sense that he was just too ahead of his time as far as being an actor who was very, very talented, but couldn't hide their queerness from the screen. You know, it was just, they were too weird, too queer, but both very fucking talented. And like Stephen Jeffries, Mark, before he did Nightmare on Elm Street, was on stage on Broadway with Cher, Kathy Bates, Karen Black, you know, in Robert Altman's Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean. It's amazing.
Yeah, his role in that is fantastic. He's incredible in that movie.
He's pre-operative Karen Black. It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like he just fell in with a really shitty agent who was like, oh, well, nerds in these comedies are really hot right now, and you're kind of nerdy, so we'll just put you out for all these nerdy roles. And like some of the stuff that I read about it, like he was really kind of bummed that he kept getting these auditions for movies that like he auditioned for Weird Science in the role that Michael Anthony Hall gets. He's a dork in Fraternity Vacation. He's supposed to be a nerd in this one, but I feel like his character is really half-baked, and that the quality of him doesn't really come across very clearly. But
he's also, I think that's the case with a lot of storylines in this movie. I think there's a lot of plot threads that they either sort of unceremoniously abandon or introduce with very little context.
With this, it seems like he played a much larger role in the movie in earlier drafts of the script, but as the Amy character sort of was introduced, she wasn't in the first draft of the movie. And so as she was sort of brought in to sort of give, you know, Charlie Brewster some like a romantic interest, like they probably had to cut parts of like the Evil Ed story, which is
there you have it. Ladies are ruining stuff.
Here's the thing. I identify with Evil Ed more out of anybody else than anybody else in the movie. It's really crazy. So here's some taglines, and they're not very good. And there's only a couple of them. There are some very good reasons to be afraid of the dark.
Okay.
And then there's
generic.
Kind of generic. And then there's this one. If you love being scared, it'll be the night of your life.
Also generic.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was,
I mean, it's no Satan's waiting. Satan's waiting.
So this was released in August of '85, like we said, with an estimated budget of around $8 million. And it was a surprise hit for Columbia, who just used it to fill up the last spot on their '85 schedule. And it ended up outperforming the movies that they expected to be huge hits. A movie called Silverado, which was a Western, and Perfect, which is John Travolta, Jamie Lee Curtis aerobics movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one you get the popular meme of Jamie Lee Curtis thrusting her crotch.
Yeah. And so while neither of those movies were bombs, but their combined box office gross fell just short of Fright Night's total take. So suck it, horror haters. Yep. Mm-hmm. And it also reviewed very well, even though the the reviewers and critics were characteristically shitty and passive aggressive about it. But yeah, like even fucking Roger Ebert liked it. Yep.
I mean, it is a fun 80s vampire romp with style, and it just I think it delivers. And you can watch it I know Dave has serious criticisms, but I think as the cult
burn it to the ground,
as the cult queen who kind of screens it to this day and gets to sort of see how it plays, you know, with an audience now. Some of these things don't really stand the test of time, and Fright Night really does. You know, like it still plays, it's still really entertaining for an audience. The finale is fabulous. It's just a great movie. I mean, I love The Hunger, but The Hunger is boring.
Yeah. You know that the Hunger's great
it,
for a few very key scenes and a couple of performances, but it is a long movie where not much happens.
Yeah.
I will say, in my defense, Peaches Christ, I will say, from a position of pure spectatorship, this is a really fun movie. You know, if you just sit back and watch it, it is a great time. It is campy as hell, despite what Tom Holland says. It's super fun. But I think once we engage with it more critically, that's when I started to be like, well, there's a lot of stuff here that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So as long as, you know, you don't give a shit about that, then it's super fun. It's fun to watch. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to quote. But it's like once we start, like, you know, one of the reasons we're kind of doing this show is to revisit the stuff we really loved when we were younger. And to see what holds up and what doesn't. And when you start to look at it that way, things take on a very different meaning, especially when we look at them now. We're in our 40s at this point. And so things mean a lot different things now. And it's just, it's interesting to see what happens when you look at it from that position. And it becomes something very different. I still think even from that point of view, it still holds up very well. There's just some stuff where you're like, wait, what?
So
Okay.
why don't you bring up those things? Because I actually think you're probably right. What I've noticed, especially with my own, cult movie podcast, we often will reevaluate these things that we loved, and we sort of talk about the cringe meter. You know, like, oh God, how racist was it? How misogynistic was it? How how cringy is it? And one thing about Fright Night is it doesn't have a lot of that. Thankfully, which is nice.
I think,
and a lot of movies
for the most
in
part.
1985, oh my God, they're really awful.
The racism and the misogyny is usually what jumps out. I think it's more structurally for me in this in terms of this movie. I mean, the fact that, and obviously we know at this point that the Amy character is sort of a not a last minute edit, but she's a rewrite. And I think that feels very shoehorned in at a certain point, because it's like you have a whole story built around this kid who becomes sort of obsessed with his neighbor, and then all of a sudden you're like shoving this woman in it as though to be like, but don't worry, everybody, he has a girlfriend too, and it's like, okay, easy, everybody. The character, I mean, the Stephen Jeffers character, the evil Ed character, that's another one where you're like, you get to the point, and when we get to that point in the movie, the part where he dies, or even the part where he is turned into a vampire, you get this feeling that it is this very tragic moment, and his death is extremely tragic. And it's this really beautiful moment between Roddy McDowall and the evil Ed character. And you don't get much leading up to that. And the thing I thought was really strange is if you watch the special features on the latest release, the 4K release, they talk a lot about how Evil Ed and Charlie they're super great friends. It's like, I never get that.
I don't either. You can't really.
I mean, at best, you think they're just sort of like a little adversarial and just kind of like they kind of annoy each other. And that's about all you get. So it's like, I don't get the feeling that they're friends at all. But throughout these commentaries, they all talk about like, well, he's his only friend. And it's like, what do you mean friend? They're shitty to each other pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's like stuff like that where you're like, well, wait a minute. Why are you like, this feels like it's supposed to be more important, and yet you've given me nothing up to this point that leads me to believe that it should be. And so it's like just little stuff like that where I'm like, it's not as impactful as it could be. I still think it's a great movie, but, in terms of what we're watching, like there's a lot of competing things happening too. I think, obviously he wants to tell this vampire story that feels fun and fresh. And I think for the most part it is, but he's also, I think what Tom Holland is trying to do is defend the relevance of classic horror and classic monsters, and to show that in this age of slashers, especially coming off that first teen cycle where everything is just kind of mindless, misogyny, that these movies still have a place and they still have considerable value. And I think he does kind of do that, but it gets muddled with all this other stuff that's happening. And so you have this character, the Peter Vincent character, the Roddy McDowall, where he should feel more relevant, and that kind of comes across. And the fact that he is a little bit washed up, but you don't really get a lot of that. So he builds all this stuff into the movie that feels like in his original concept, it probably was a lot more relevant. And then for either because of, studio notes or because of whatever rewrites he had to do, it ends up kind of getting pared down until eventually you're left with kind of a shell of that original story. And those really powerful moments don't really pop the way they should. And so when I say it feels like he is this kind of feels like a first outing for him, I think that's more what I mean, is that the vision for this movie is not really there the way that something like Child's Play, but also something like Lost Boys, or like those types of things where it is very clear what they're trying to do. And here you get the feeling that there's a lot of competing ideas, and he didn't really have the confidence to be like, no, this is the story I'm telling. Let's go.
I think that's all fair. I mean, I definitely think that a lot of these movies that we loved so much, interestingly enough, run the gamut of being really good movies to really bad movies, but we can still love them. And I think Fright Night kind of falls somewhere in between. It's like I don't know. Well, The Lost Boys I think is a great example or Near Dark. Those are really good movies. In fact, The Lost Boys is better than I remembered it, right? Like as an adult, I rewatch it and I'm like, holy shit, this is a great movie.
Yeah, Dave, you used to talk shit openly on this podcast about that movie.
I
really
always think about that movie and I think, I don't remember liking that movie. And yet every time I watch it, I'm like, that is a really good movie. It is solid from beginning to end, especially when you consider the rest of the shit that fucking Joel Schumacher did.
It is amazing because he really kind of, I want to root for Joel Schumacher. Because who doesn't want to root for a big Queenie mess, but his Batman movies are like, oof, when you can, especially with
the franchise.
I mean, you look at something like Batman Returns, and you're like, holy shit, this is amazing! What a cool direction they're taking this in. And then, Joel Schumacher shows up. But The Lost Boys. Wow, he really hit a home run with that one, especially more so now watching it as an adult. I showed it to my husband is Turkish, and he had a friend come over who is a movie buff in Turkey. And so I often show a bunch of titles going, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Because certain movies just fall through the void. And he had never seen The Lost Boys. And so we sat and watched it a few weeks ago. And oh my God, watching it through someone's eyes who'd never seen it before, and I loved it even more. And I do love Fright Night, but I actually fell more in love with The Lost Boys.
Yeah.
That's how I felt too. Like same thing with the other one we watched, American Werewolf. In my head, I'm always like, this movie just doesn't really do it for me. What? And then I watch it, I'm like, Jesus Christ, this movie is really, really good.
I think it's so good. I think that movie, and I also, like, as a kid, I watched An American Werewolf in London. I remember when Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, and everyone talked about, the director of Thriller and the special effects guy. And, I liked An American Werewolf in London. Don't get me wrong, but I was too young to actually really get the sheer genius of that film and the quiet moments.
Yeah,
and
I definitely did not appreciate it until I was an adult, because I was and I
mean, it's also tainted by John Landis just kind of being not a great person.
Not.
No, but like I think to this day I still put The Howling above it, but it wasn't until I don't know, the last.
Really?
I love The Howling.
The Howling.
Is The Howling your favorite werewolf movie?
No, The Wolfman is my favorite. Movie, but The Howling is definitely a top. Like if I had to like do a top three, it's in the top three for sure. And American Werewolf is would probably be number 3.
Okay, so The Howling, and American Werewolf, and The Wolfman. So what about? So now I'm interviewing you guys. What about since this is the vampire movie? Top 3 vampire movies.
Oh God.
Spanish Dracula. Actually, I can't say that. I've not seen it. I hear, though, I've been told for years that it is superior to the Bela Lugosi one. I'm a huge fan of the Mexican Dracula film. I think it is far superior to the American one. No, Lugosi vampire Dracula 100%. Near Dark, absolutely, probably number 2, very close number 2, and
Twins of Evil.
Ah.
Yeah. Yep.
Really?
I love Twins
Great
of Evil.
choice.
Is fucking great.
You know what I love?
Deep cut.
That I just saw at Berkeley Rep of all places, they did a stage version, is the original Let the Right One In.
Ooh.
And they just and the American one, not so much. But
I haven't seen that one. I saw the
original. I
not
love it so much. I think because it's one of those things where Near Dark did this well, where and Interview with a Vampire, but it's not easy to do, to have a kid play an old person effectively and believably is tough. And I feel like, especially with Let the Right One In, the fact that it's also this transgender ambiguous kid and there's all this just weird dark shit going on, and it's so dark. And I love the snowy, backdrop of it all. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, like Let the Right One In would probably have to be in my top 3, and maybe even Near Dark. Funnily enough, a friend of mine is Josh Miller, who plays the kid in Near Dark. Yeah. So Josh and I are old friends. We got to know each other through his performance in Teen Witch. I've celebrated Teen Witch many times. And so, but do you know that, okay, this is how Hollywood, I now we're really deviating, how Hollywood Josh Miller's family is. Do you know his mother was the kidnapped woman, the girl in Faster Pussycat Kill Kill?
I did not know that, actually.
Yes. And his father, of course, is the priest. In The Exorcist.
Yeah.
His brother, of course, is in The Lost Boys.
Yeah, it's all
connected.
It's all connected. I never even thought about that. God, that family had 2 of their kids in the best 80s vampire films.
Right?
I will say, though, what I think all of those things that we're talking, all these movies that we're just talking about now, what they all have in common is a confident director. Someone who's willing to just be like, this is the movie I am going to make. And I think that's what is lacking in Fright Night is he doesn't quite have that. I think Tom Holland is a great film writer. His movies are so creative. He's bringing a lot of really new, fun, fresh ideas that I think draw from the classic horror that I don't know about you, Peaches, but like our father loves sort of old Hollywood. And we were very, very, he would show us a lot of old Hollywood films. And so we developed our love of film sort of rooted in old Hollywood. And so I still have a very strong affinity for that era. And you can see that Tom Holland is bringing this stuff in. And that's what makes this movie fun. But he just didn't have the focus and I think the confidence to say, I am making this movie. We don't need to add a girlfriend to make it a teen date movie. Like, we're just going to make this cool ass movie and it's going to be great. And I that's what I think all these other things we're talking about, like these really clear visions, Near Dark, Let the Right One In. These are all people who are like, I'm going to make this movie. I've got this. Stand back. Everybody.
No, I can definitely get down with that. Being his first feature film, he probably didn't have the latitude to be like, this is the movie I'm making. So he probably had to cave to a bit of studio pressure, but
Yeah. I think you feel that in like, I could get that throughout. Like a lot of times when I'm watching stuff, it's like you hit certain points in a movie and you're like, this feels like this was someone else's idea.
Right.
This feels like you're jamming this in here. Like, and it's usually, especially in something like this where there are such like overt queer moments, you get the feeling that someone was like, no, you can't do that. He has to have a girlfriend. They have to have sex at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Or like there has to be a big romance. And it's like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, get out of here.
Yeah, I think those are all fair criticisms. And unfortunately, for better or worse, they exist in a lot of these a lot of movies, a lot of Hollywood movies constantly.
Yeah, especially at this time.
Exactly.
Though.
So I would agree with all of that. And and especially this sort of the I guess for me, Chris Sarandon, they're all really, really good, but like there are certain standouts who kind of like show up and I think Chris Sarandon is so good, and Stephen Jeffries is so unique, and they really put this movie and those special effects. So like, despite those folks not liking them, it just puts this movie in this sort of it sends it over the edge to it. It's like, okay, this is really good.
Yeah.
But without some of that stuff, it might not have succeeded. It could have been forgettable, and it's not, because it adds up to being a really satisfying, fun movie. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, and I really like the music, the soundtrack. I think is quite good.
My God, both the score of the Brad Fiedel score is super good, super 80s.
Yes,
and like,
which, I mean, that's what he excels at too. I mean, look, if you just go down his resume, it is like action movie after action. He had just come off
of the Terminator to do this one.
Yeah.
Which is a fucking killer score.
Yeah. And then the soundtrack album, like the actual like licensed, tracks are fucking awesome. There's, that really funny like Jay Giles Band theme song, Sparks are on it. Like it's so good.
Yep.
Yeah.
But so here's a few facts about the movie. So the character Peter Vincent is named for Peter Cushing and Vincent Price.
Love of my life, Vincent Price.
And so Holland wrote the part of Peter Vincent for Vincent Price, but there's differing stories about why he didn't take it. One says that Price turned it down because he'd been so badly typecast over the years, but I find this very hard to believe.
No, that's not true at all.
It's Vincent fucking Price.
I am the Vincent Price fan. That is THEE Vincent Price fan. He would never have done that. Vincent Price loved these movies. He loved these roles because he was a big, hammy actor who loved going big. And he thought this stuff was super fun. He's one of those performers where you learn about him and there was no pretense. There was no ego. Well, there's probably a little ego, but not a lot. And he just loved this stuff. The reality was he was quite old at the time.
Yeah, so that was my next is the reality of it is he was very old. His health was in decline. So he wasn't really capable of doing much more than like cameos or like TV appearances at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stuff he's doing around this time, it's Whales of August, where like you don't have to do much.
He's in the wraparound stuff from A Whisper to a Scream. But anyways, after this movie,
he's in Monster Club around this time as well.
No, Monster Club was 1980. But yeah, so I suppose But anyways, he died 8 years after this movie.
So, right after he did Edward Scissorhands, because that would have been shortly. Yeah,
and he
did a lot of voice acting at this time too. It's like real low maintenance stuff.
But personally, I can't really see Vincent Price in the role because Roddy McDowall really does make this his own.
Because you have to, Roddy McDowall sells the idea that this is a washed up man, that this is a man with very little confidence. And Vincent Price is nothing if not overconfident.
Yeah.
Like every role he plays is big and present and wonderful. And you have to sell this as someone who really doesn't believe what he's doing anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the story is that like the shit he tries to do to save the day doesn't work because he doesn't believe in any of it.
Right.
And I don't think Vincent Price sells that the way that Roddy McDowall really does.
No, I love me some Planet of the Apes, but this is probably my favorite movie of his. Yeah. So there is also a.
Well, I'm gonna say I'm batting for Poseidon Adventure.
Okay.
I love the Poseidon Adventure so much.
Yeah. So there is also a Fright Night video game that was published.
I want to play that.
I want to play it too. Published in 1988 for the Commodore Amiga, in which you play not Charlie Brewster but Jerry Dandridge.
Oh.
Reviews all say that it looks great, but playing the game actually sucks.
I did not know there was a game.
I did not know this until I did the research for this.
It's just hour after hour of eating apples and stroking your roommate's face.
Yeah. So, like most movies released in the 70s and 80s, there is a novelization which is long out of print by author John Skipp, who had 1 month to write it from first draft to final, and I assume that there were not many drafts in between.
Yeah, give it 2 months and one of these fucking companies will be reprinting it any day now.
No, I know, but actually there is another novelization that was actually written by Holland in like the last 10 years or so. There was a remake in 2011, which I've been meaning to watch, but I've never gotten around to it. It stars Anton Yelchin as Brewster, Christopher Mintz-Plasse as Ed, and Colin Farrell as Dandridge. Oh, and also David Tennant as Peter Vincent. I'm told it's pretty decent.
I haven't seen it either. I mean, I'm not anti-remake because obviously some of the things I love the most are actually remakes. But I am kind of baffled by sometimes remaking things that were so great already, like where I'm like, okay, I don't need to see another Poltergeist. I don't need to see
I think
another Child's Play.
Well, especially when they don't do anything new to it. Like if you're just going to give me a shot for shot remake, then I can just watch the original.
Yeah, I think that one came out kind of at the tail end of that sort of remake fad that was happening. And by that point, I was just like, I'm not interested in any remakes anyways. Why the fuck would I watch this? But then like people I knew who had seen it were like, no, it's pretty good. You should see it. So so maybe one of these things.
It's got a strong cast, but
yeah.
I mean, there's only so many hours in the day.
Right. Apparently the vibe is way different. It's a much like darker, meaner movie. But I don't know. Maybe I'll get around to it at some point. And here's lastly, there was an unofficial Mollywood remake called Kalpana House in 1989. I have not seen it, but I'm told it's terrible. You can watch it on YouTube.
Okay,
it is,
and I probably will.
Yeah, it's from what I can tell, it is like beat for beat. It's the same movie, just made in India.
Wow.
Okay.
Yep. So shall we get into it?
Yeah.
I certainly hope so.
I know. Here we go. So we open on a full moon and a pan around a neighborhood at night as a man and a woman talk as though they're in a vampire movie. Then as we pan up into the second floor room of a nearby house, we learn that it is a vampire movie playing on a TV. It's a Peter Vincent movie where he plays a vampire killer. And so meanwhile, on the floor nearby, Charlie and his girlfriend Amy make out. And it turns out that the movie is a part of something called Fright Night, the local TV horror movie show where Peter Vincent is the host.
Why are they on the floor?
I don't know. I do not know.
Also, I mean, I think in the special features, I think Tom Holland says something about how like, the movie that they're watching is kind of a callback to the kind of B movie stuff of the drive-ins past. Mm-hmm. It feels to me a lot more Dark Shadows than anything else.
Yeah, the way that they talk to each other.
Fact that he's got the stake facing the wrong direction. Like if you've ever watched Dark Shadows, which I am a big fan of Dark Shadows, they fuck up left and right in that, and it just feels Dark Shadows to me.
Yeah, I would be willing to bet that Holland was very familiar with Dark Shadows because it's hard to understate like what a sensation that show was at the time. Like our mother was a fan of that show.
Well, I'm a huge fan of it now. I am going to get a Julia Hoffman tattoo soon.
Oh, very
wow.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm committed. I'm real committed. Peaches, I think this is one of those moments too where you said what are the parts that don't hold up? This is one of the ones where Charlie comes across looking real gross. Because he Amy puts up a boundary of like, this is as far as she's willing to go, and he kind of jumps up and gives that like, come on, we've been dating for blah 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 however long, and it's like, dude, give it 5 minutes and you're gonna be obsessed with the man next door. So I don't think you have a lot of room to be complaining here.
Yeah. And I would agree that it feels like inserted at the 11th hour, like the relationship was forced at a late draft.
Yeah. So Charlie wants to go further. Amy doesn't and stops him, but then she relents. And then it suggests that they take it to the bed. But as they do, Charlie notices two dudes next door moving an elaborate coffin into the basement. And it completely distracts him from the girl on his bed taking her shirt off.
I'd say it's more coffin-ish than coffin.
Right. When you actually see the coffins a little bit later on in the movie, as they're sort of prepping the one that she's supposed to occupy, you couldn't fit a child into these coffins.
No, I mean, it could be a coffin. It could be a sideboard. Who am I to say? Honestly. Yeah. Also, when you say when the girl is taking off her top in your bed, when that girl is Marcy from Married with Children.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to comment on a lady's looks, but
right.
So yeah, the two of them, they're supposed to be teenagers, and both of them were like well into their 20s while they were making this movie. But I
think she's 27, and I think he's like 21, 22.
Yeah, but she looks the part. She looks quite young. So angry, Amy storms out, and Charlie chases her.
And then they talk briefly with his mom while Charlie completely ignores her because he's too busy watching the new neighbors move in by moonlight.
What's interesting about this set? So the set where they're shooting this is the Disney backlot, and they're shooting on the same lot that Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh yeah,
where they shot that.
Yeah. That's the thing is this movie is supposed to take place in Iowa, but man, it looks like a backlot in Culver City. Right?
But I mean, it gives it that feeling of that. It lends itself to that sort of whimsy, in the idea that like this is because it's a backlot, so it's not very big. I mean, it's big in terms of like where you're filming, but it all feels very fake. It's sort of like when you watch Rear Window.
Yeah. Or a lot of like Joe Dante's movies come across like this, like in The Burbs. The Burbs it looks like a studio backlot neighborhood,
and it really gives it that feeling of like this is small town America. And what I find really interesting about that idea is that it's still, even though this movie is a vampire movie and it is playing kind of in a fun way, it brings that idea of. Like what you get in Halloween, where you get this sort of menace comes into a small town, and it's kind of faceless, and it could be anybody. And even though he's trying to have a campy, fun time, at the same time, it is that feeling of like the evil comes out of the city, because vampires until this point had been either castles or very urban. And now we get like vampire comes. That's what feels, again, it's that feeling of like, this is super 80s, that fear of like something dangerous is coming into suburbia. Look out, everybody. And by everybody, we mean white people.
Because that's the thing is, at its heart, this movie is Dracula. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's this exotic foreign.
Well, is it though? Like you said, because you said that to me the other night, and I thought it's Dracula, but maybe Dracula as an afterthought.
Well, it's all of this. It's all of the Dracula stuff after the Jonathan Harker sections. So it's exotic foreign gentleman like moves into this kind of like unfamiliar setting and kind of becomes a sort of threat that like really everybody was trying to sort of escape, because that's really what the suburbs kind of represent, in a lot of these movies. And also,
well, I mean, especially when you say we're talking about the queerness of this movie. This is 1985, so we're 4 years into the AIDS crisis. I mean, at this point, the AIDS crisis is a full blown, pandemic, and so you get that feeling of like, if what the suburbs represents is white flight, and sort of wealthy white flight at that, then you get this feeling in the mid 80s of like, everybody, we ran to the suburbs to hide. And now here the gays are permeating the suburbs as well.
Yeah.
Like, and obviously I don't think Tom Holland, if he did indeed know what he was doing, I don't think he was going to take it that far, but it is interesting to think.
Oh my God. I think it's totally worth noting. And I mean, as far as gay tropes go, not only were they wearing nice sweaters and they were two handsome men, in the 1985, people knew gay people. It wasn't like, it was like the sexual, the everything was in chaos because of AIDS, but people at this point, it's not the 50s. People knew gay people. People knew what gay people were. And they made these people antiques dealers.
And so I wonder, are they leaning into that idea of like, the sort of gay stereotypes, or is that a nod to Salem's Lot?
That could very well be. Well, is he an antiques dealer? Because
aren't they into
antiques? He fixes up houses and he has a live-in carpenter.
They kind of frame like the mother frames it as, I think she says he's an antiques dealer.
She does, yeah.
And then she says he has a live-in, but then she says he's probably gay, and it's like, girl, come on.
Yeah,
probably.
No, that's actually a point I hadn't really considered, because this really is like Kurt Barlow, and I can't remember his ghoul's name. Straker. That very much is that sort of model, but based on the book and not the TV series, because Barlow's a.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think they do. Well, I mean, Barlow is a giant blue monster in the movie, but I think the James Mason character is very, very queeny. But that's the interesting thing about these two characters, is that they're so, to say that, we didn't mean for it to be queer. It's like you have cast these people and you have written these characters as the queeniest bitches on the block. I mean, they're cocking an eyebrow and they are rating a bitch one after another.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say, no, I had no idea. I was like, yes, you did.
I know. So the next day at school, Charlie fails a trigonometry quiz, and we meet his friend Ed, who Charlie calls evil. And I feel like there's a backstory to that we never hear.
And I think that's the biggest failing of this movie is their failure to really flesh these characters out, because this relationship feels like it's central to the whole story.
Yeah.
And then we get this really beautiful moment later. And it's like, that could have been so much bigger and so much more important. It's not, though.
Yeah. So back at home, Charlie gets home. He talks to his mom a bit about the new guy next door who is a live-in carpenter. His mom remarks, with my luck, he's probably gay. Lady, you don't know the half. So, like we said, Stark and Sarandon were apparently completely oblivious to the subtext of their relationship until they actually saw the movie. And then
I don't buy that.
By night, Charlie does his homework and he hears a scream from the house next door. And so the next day at some sort of diner, Charlie.
Oh, this is after we get the Playboy Playmate.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Stepping out of the car where they make her nipples erect for the film. For fuck's sake. There's a thing that doesn't hold up well.
Yeah. What we see is, there's a scene where Charlie's getting home from school and there's this like sexy lady getting out of a cab in a very ridiculous dress for Iowa. And he directs her to the house next door. And so she's a prostitute. Gold belt.
It's the dead giveaway.
Gold belt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next day at this diner, Charlie and Amy make up, but a television at the diner reports that the sexy lady that Charlie saw the day before was found dead. And this is the second body found in as many days. Once again, he's ignoring her in favor of the TV. Amy gets mad, grabs some dude's burger, smashes it in Charlie's face, sending evil Ed.
Wait, did you say diner?
Yeah.
Aren't they in like a cafeteria, like a high school cafeteria?
It's like a diner, or maybe it's a cafeteria. I don't know. But
I know it's been a while since you've been in high school.
What school cafeteria has a fucking television on playing the news?
I always thought it was a diner,
Hollywood.
to be honest. I never thought it was a school cafeteria.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was okay.
But it is filled with like teenagers, so I guess you could see it could be either, really.
Yeah.
But I don't think it matters.
No, but Charlie gets the burger in his face, sends evil Ed into a fit of hysterics, to which he says,
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster. I can't stand it.
which is like one of the it's probably the line of the movie.
Yeah.
So much so that they come back to it later.
Yeah. But
in an ill-advised moment.
I know. So back at home, Charlie tries to get a look at the new house, catches the eye of a live-in carpenter who's busy painting over the windows, and he intercepts Charlie as he's about to sneak into the basement and scares him off.
This is another. So this movie is full of people making weird choices, for actors making weird choices. Now, I'm not an actor. I don't really know how any of that works, but I feel like there's a couple things that happen in this movie. This is one of them where he plays this character in such a strange way, where he's like one part 80s bully villain.
Yeah.
One part actual menace, and it works for the most part, but it is such a weird vibe.
Yeah, so this is an actor named Jonathan Stark. I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything else, but
he was one of the groundlings, one of the original.
He's one of the original groundlings. Yeah, so he's a comedian, but that's his whole thing,
and an improv comedian at that.
Yeah, so
I think that works to his credit. I mean, everything he does, it doesn't feel wrong. It just feels a little bit. I mean, maybe that's a testament to his abilities that it is off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
But at the same time, I would say he's supposed to be off-putting. It's not really clear what sort of a creature he is, because later on,
I think that's another one of these moments where you're like, okay, you maybe had something else in mind for this character that it doesn't work, because you never really know who he is, what he is, or why he's there.
Yeah.
He's just sort of there to fill a role. And that's one of those where it sort of falls off a little bit.
Yeah. So that night, Charlie watches the house next door until he falls asleep. Then he wakes up in time to see a woman undressing in the house next door. And there's a dude about to bite her on the neck. And he appears to have fangs. And just as he's about to bite that neck, he looks up directly at Charlie, pulls the blinds down.
He also has big, beautiful nails.
Yeah, that's right. So now Charlie runs outside in time to see the carpenter appearing to load a body-sized bag into his Jeep from his hiding spot in the bushes. He's pretty well hidden, but then his mom comes out calling him, which attracts the attention of the carpenter and the vampire. He takes a huge chomp out of the apple, throws it towards Charlie's hiding spot, indicating that
he does. He takes a huge chomp, and the huge chomp is like through the core of the apple
because he's a monster. He's got a big vampire mouth. So apparently, so this is like I never really thought about this until I looked it up because I never really noticed it until it was pointed out to me. But Sarandon eats fruit throughout the movie because he read that most bats are frugivores. Meaning they mostly eat fruit, and because he's a vampire and he can turn into a bat, it just makes sense that he'd eat fruit.
Now listen, you may have noticed just a minute ago I said I'm not an actor. But Christopher Sarandon is an actor, and I feel like maybe he's overthinking things a little bit here.
Yeah. So when
calm down.
Before they actually went into production on this, they had a couple of weeks where they did like rehearsals for the movies. They blocked it. They did all their lines. And so when they actually got down to shooting it, it was a really quick process. But in the process of that sort of rehearsal, Holland had everybody like write like a background of their character, and at some point he was like, oh, okay, so vampires and bats eat fruit, like obviously I'm going to eat fruit. And Holland was like, I fucking love that, do that. And so I really like this idea that Holland puts forth is like, I want you to go write a backstory for your character, because I really feel like it makes them embody this character a lot more than they might otherwise do. Stephen Jeffries, most notably, is the one who didn't do it, refused to do it. Yeah. So Charlie then tries to explain to everybody that there's a vampire next door, as one does, including the cops, who he brings over to the house. We find out that the carpenter is a guy named Billy Cole, who's a roommate to Jerry Dandridge. And he also...
What's that? Is a roommate. Big old air quotes, a roommate.
Yep. And he also has a painting of a woman that looks a lot like Amy.
That's another part where I'm like, this feels so fucking shoehorned in. Again, we're like, now we have this like, well, there has to be a reason why he wants Amy. Like, you wouldn't have to do this if you didn't fucking jam Amy in the movie in the first place. Just make a movie about dudes. Yeah. Do what I want. So neither the cop or Billy take Charlie seriously, and they openly mock him. And I'm not going to lie, it's pretty funny. This is I think one of the things that makes it feel so quintessentially 80s is that idea. It's the Goonies, it's Monster Squad, it's all of those where it's like, it's kids versus problem. Mm-hmm. And the adults in this sort of very kind of Peanutsian way, the adults are very non-present. Like, yeah, he has a mom and she's kind of in it a little bit. Oh, yeah, but not really. Some really fucked up shit happens to, like, his house and his possessions. Like, Jerry wrecks his car at a certain point and, like, throws him through the closet door and beats the shit out of him. And his mom is just like, hey, what's going on in here? But that feels very 80s to me, of, like, it is the kids that have to solve the problem. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think... Stranger Things really resonates with people of a certain age, because that kind of was what it was like in the 80s. This is obviously an extreme example. The emergence of, and I think there's a market logic to all of this, because it is that emergence of kids as consumers, where it's like, okay, now we're pitching to children. We're making movies for kids. How do we do that? How do we lure them in? Well, you make them the star of the story, when in reality, we just want to see you fall down a hill and get hurt. Yeah. That's what we want. That's why we want kids falling down. Hey, everybody, here's what Generation X wants. We want to see you fall down a goddamn hill. I don't want to see you get hit by a car. I just want to see you fall down. But in the meantime, we're going to make movies where you're the hero. Yeah. And I think that feels particularly 80s to me. Yeah, because it disappears as the 90s kind of dawns. It's a very, very strange thing. Well, I mean, again, there's a market logic to that as well, and that is that the kids who were going to the movies in the 80s are now going to the movies in the 90s, but they're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
So, they still want to see themselves. They're just in their teens and 20s now.
Yeah, I think it's important to remind folks that weren't Gen X and didn't grow up as kids in the 80s. Yes, we were completely on our own. There was no adult supervision. So, things like Stranger Things or Fright Night, or these movies, like E.T. is essentially a movie about don't trust the adults, It was all very real. I mean, that's how we were. Yeah, boomers didn't raise us. They just sort of told us to, be home when the street lamp is on.
Well, I challenged that a little bit too, where it's like, we all went out and played all that. It's like, no, we didn't. We all sat in front of the fucking television just as much as anybody else did.
Yep. So Charlie goes to Evil Ed's house to tell him about the vampire. And he takes him about as seriously as the cop did, but he helps Charlie out anyway, and he runs down the rules for repelling vampires. And it's all the usual stuff. Crosses, holy water, and garlic. The most powerful weapon of all is that a vampire can't enter his house uninvited.
Okay, so here's what I will say about this particular part. I think, and this maybe speaks to Stephen Jeffries' trajectory as an actor, is that we're again supposed to accept that they're very good friends, and that if that were the case, and if that were the narrative we were given, then a lot of what happens would make sense. Otherwise, he's a very close talker. There's a lot of weird touching. It's like, I don't touch a lot of people that I'm not sleeping with. And he's very kind of like very in his face, a lot of touching, a lot of grabbing. And it's like, all we know is that they're kind of associates from school.
Yeah.
But now he's grabbing him, he's touching him. It's like it just that contributes to that weird performance that Stephen Jeffries gives. That's like, what are you doing? Because these are strange choices you're making. The character as a whole is already very big and weird, and you're making it even more weird. And that would make sense if they were good friends, but we don't know that they are.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you're kind of just grabbing him and touching him and being weird.
Yeah. So Charlie sets to securing his room, happy that the vampire can't just walk in uninvited. And then his mom calls him down to introduce him to the new neighbor who she has invited into the house. And this is our first introduction to Jerry Dandridge, who is one sexy vampire. And he makes no mistake about letting Charlie know that he can now just waltz into his house anytime he wants. Also, Charlie's mom is crazy horny for Jerry.
Which, again, weird choice for a person who's not going to be in the movie that much.
Yeah.
But who wouldn't be?
I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I said early on, like, I thought that Chris Sarandon was gay based on this character. Because he's sexy as hell, rolls in, real elegant, real classy. I just assume he's gay.
Yeah.
So, predictably, Jerry lets himself into Charlie's house. You can hear him walking around on the roof. And so Charlie sneaks around his house with his cross, looking for Jerry, but he becomes convinced that the sound he heard was just some branches against the window. But Jerry is actually there and lets himself into the house through Charlie's mom's window before going to Charlie's room to wait for him. And now Charlie, thinking he's safe, relaxes, and that's when Jerry attacks. He roughs up Charlie, gives him a chance to get out of this alive, basically by just saying, like, forget about it. Jerry promises to leave him alone, but then Charlie tries to ward him off with a cross, and Jerry demonstrates his power by casually flicking the lock off the window and easily lifting the window, which has been nailed shut.
Well, he actually says something I think is really interesting. Is he says, "I'm going to give you something that I never had." And that is a choice. And it's such an interesting moment because it's like it gives you insight into more like depth of this character that we don't really get a little bit later on. But like there's these parts of the story where you're like, I feel like there's something that's supposed to be something more here that I'm not getting. But it's a great moment. It's very cool. Then he kicks the shit out of him.
Oh yeah, but, he throws him through the closet door and beats crap out of him. They struggle. He's got it. Does he smash? No, he lifts the window and he's like basically dangling him out the window. And this is when
which is a very threatening moment because he just the nails are still hanging out of the window. Like they're still sticking through the actual window part of the window.
Mm-hmm.
And the pencil effect. So what ends up happening is he grabs a pencil off of his desk. He stabs Jerry in the hand, and then he pulls it back. And this is the thing is when he does it, Jerry spins away from him in this really strange way. Like this is a grievous injury for some reason. But what you see is he looks at it. And he's got the pencil through his hand, and he does this thing where he like pulls the pencil out, and it appears to sort of like draw the thing out. And then he looks at the other side, and the pencil's gone. It's a super cool effect. That was inspired by a scene from Excalibur where Lancelot is run through by a sword. So this is apparently enough to reveal Jerry's true form, which is a nasty ass vampire thing. And
I think it still looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of the like transformed kind of like monstrous animalistic vampire, like
the Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, like I get it. You kind of want to give him a look. But I don't know. I think the fangs are enough.
Yeah,
for me,
I agree.
Quite frankly,
I like him in his third form later on.
Oh yeah.
Where he's kind of really monstrous looking.
Yeah,
and yet still very charming.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So this attack is enough to wake Charlie's mom up and scare Jerry away. He gradually transforms back and runs away. And she comes in and says, he tells her he had just had a nightmare that fucking trashed his room. She says, "Do you want a Valium?"
I caught that. Again, quintessentially 80s.
So a few minutes later, Jerry calls him up to let him know that he trashed his car, because you hear him doing something out in the yard after this happens, and that he's going to kill him too. And so Billy Cole, Jerry's ghoul or whatever, he cleans the wound on his hand.
Okay, so this is where I think we can say Tom Holland may be full of shit a little bit.
Yeah.
Because this is the moment where Billy kneels in front of him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's like it's very clear what he is intending for this to look like.
Oh yeah, it's a very intimate moment. It's very erotic. And then
it also looks like he's blowing him, from his perspective. And it's like, okay, if you can't say you didn't know that there was sort of like a queer undertone here, where you're setting up a shot where it looks like this one dude's blowing the other guy.
So at the same time, Peter Vincent is on TV talking about how he believes in vampires. Charlie watches him kill a vampire in one of his movies. He gets really excited. And the next day, he intercepts Peter on his way out of the studio, learning that Vincent was just fired from his gig at Fright Night because nobody wants to see vampires of the Hammer variety anymore. They only want masked madmen, it seems. And so Peter at first thinks that Charlie is just a fan, but then he suddenly realizes that he's serious and he wants his help in killing Jerry Dandridge, who does his best. And so he does his best to shake Charlie, who is acting like a crazy person. And so with nobody left to turn to, he asks Amy and Ed for help, and they arrive at his house to find his room covered in candles, garlic, and crosses as he sharpens a stake that he intends to drive into Jerry while he sleeps during the day. And they too think he's crazy, as they should. And so looking for help, they run to Peter Vincent, who's being evicted from his apartment. That guy just can't catch a break. So their plan is to bribe Peter Vincent to come up with them to perform this vampire test to prove that Jerry's not really a vampire. The plan is to have him drink holy water, which will just be regular old tap water. And so,
I will say, I think the old age makeup on Roddy McDowall looks really good.
The hair looks very powdered.
The hair is terrible. The hair is not like, it looks like they're just sort of dumping baby powder in his hair. I think everything else, like if you look at any old age makeup, pretty much any time, it kind of looks pretty shitty because it's a hard thing to recreate. But I think on him, it's pretty realistic with the exception of the powdery hair.
Yeah. So, they arrive. Jerry dramatically descends the stairs in the main hall, and he enthusiastically greets Peter Vincent, and he is particularly taken by Amy, and she's taken with him as well. And so Jerry readily drinks the water, proving to everyone that he's not a vampire, but Charlie isn't convinced, of course. There's some passive-aggressive threats toward Charlie, suggesting that Jerry will kill his friends too. The clincher on the scene is that as they are about to leave, Peter Vincent produces a small mirror to check himself out on, and in the process notice that Jerry has no reflection.
And this is that moment. This is the very Dracula moment, because this actually happens in Dracula.
Yes, yeah. So Peter sucks at hiding his shock. He drops the mirror, which leaves a little piece on the floor, which Jerry finds.
Peaches, are you a video game person at all?
No, I mean, that's one thing I don't know. You'd think I would be, being such a Gen Xer, but I'm not.
There's a video game series called Fallout, and Roddy McDowall plays the president in one of them. And every time he speaks, it's all I can hear is President John Henry Eden from Fallout 3.
Oh, wow, that's funny.
Because he has such a distinctive voice.
I mean, it's that sort of same thing with just watching Class of 1984. It's sort of like, there he is, Peter Vincent.
Yeah, he's the robot Vincent. No. Yes, Vincent in The Black Hole. Also, and you just immediately
the gay robot Vincent.
The gay robot.
Oh my God.
Who kills Maximilian with a dick drill.
Well, that's fierce.
Mm-hmm. So walking Amy home.
Yeah. Take that, American Horror Story.
Yeah.
Someone else did it better. Surprise.
Yeah. So walking Amy home, Evil Ed is still unconvinced. He disappears down an alley and he pretends to be bitten by a vampire. Now, pissed off, Charlie leaves him on his own in the alley, and it turns out that Jerry has been following him in a sweet leather overcoat. And now, cornered, Jerry takes the form of mist that vampires sometimes do. I fucking love that scene. This movie's got a lot of fog machine going on in it. To great effect.
And I love a fog machine, and just in any movie. I want to get one for my house, to be honest with you.
I very nearly did at Spirit Halloween.
And when I say by my house, I mean the 3-room apartment I live in. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have many, many, many fog machines because I own a haunted attraction. So,
brag, why don't you?
So I love the smell of fog. Whenever the actors complain about it, I'm like, go fuck yourselves.
I know, it's got a very distinct. It has a very distinct odor that I do love.
Yeah.
That distinct odor is community theater.
Exactly. I love it. I'm like, oh, the show's about to start.
So what he ends up doing is he offers Ed the gift of vampirism, which he accepts after a monologue about being different and no longer being picked on or singled out for being different.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where it's like, this would be a very powerful monologue if we understood why it was that Ed felt so excluded and why it was that Ed felt so different. I mean, you get the feeling that, like, he is a bit of an outsider in school, does not have friends, but you don't feel that.
You never see it in action, and so it feels disconnected from the intention of the scene. Also,
but even separate from that, like you feel, because there is sort of an inherent queerness to this character.
I was gonna say, it kind of feels like Jerry's saying one thing but meaning something else.
Well, and then because he follows it up by wrapping him in his arms and taking him in a weird, I understand, I think what they're going for is a sort of bat wing, wrapping in the wing kind of vibe. But you don't really get that because I don't know, they never really deliver on that part of the story. And so it feels a little empty.
So, spooked, Charlie and Amy run from Jerry, who magically appears at every turn. And then they sneak into a crowded nightclub. Now, Evil Ed, meanwhile, gets himself invited into Peter Vincent's place, where he reveals to Peter that he's now a vampire and sets to attacking him. Peter, who gets the best of Ed when he presses across to his forehead, leaving behind a bad burn, which becomes kind of a big piece of sort of Evil Ed's character now. And repelled by Vincent's on-screen character, Ed leaps out the window. So back at the club, as Charlie tries to get in touch with Peter, Jerry lets himself into the club, draws Amy to him with his raw, hypnotic vampire sexiness.
Things are about to get real sexy.
Ooh, so sexy.
And I feel like in this moment, so he is, Sarandon is sort of puffing up Amy's hair. And I thought, are they doing this in order to make it less obvious later when they give her a surprise wig?
Is it
probably.
Is it a wig?
No, it's definitely a wig.
The sudden change in hair color and the long hair is like supposed to be part of her like vampiric transformation. They don't even bother
to try to preempt any of this. They're just like, and then all of a sudden she has long hair. Enjoy.
Yep.
And bigger boobs. They molded fake rubber boobs for her to wear.
Here's a thing that here's another moment, like revisiting these movies and watching these special features, because these movies were made at a time, there's 70s and 80s when people who are now in their 60s and 70s were, 20s and 30s. And to hear some of these guys be like, and then she had, we had to have her take her boobs out, haha. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ.
I know.
Do we have to do this?
I know. There's a bit in it in some of that stuff. There's basically on the Blu-ray that came out of this, there's a really awesome fucking documentary called You're So Cool, Brewster. It's 3.5 hours long.
Wow. Yeah, it is long.
Really, really long.
I made it 2 hours into it, and I was like, I can't commit this much of my life to this.
Wow. No, I used it. I sourced a lot of from this in it, and I had to do it in 2 sittings. But there's one part where she's got the eye contacts in, and she's got the mouth on, and she keeps like bumping into shit and hitting her head. And she, according to one of the sort of special effects technicians, she's like laughing it off because everybody's like, ah ha ha. And at a certain point, he's like, she was very clearly in peril and was like done with this. So I went and just pulled the fucking appliance off of her. It was like, we're done here. I think we got the shot. And they're like, actually, no, we're not. I need you to fix that. So yeah, there were people on the set who were like, okay, enough of this shit.
And I mean, I ran into this another time when we watched Halloween, and I listened to the commentary, and Dean Cundy is sort of consummate professional DP, and he just sort of talks about the making of the film. And the other two dudes, every now and then, they're just like, oh, now here we get to see PJ Soul's boobs. And it's like, for fuck's sake, you are a man in your 60s.
Right.
Just stop talking about that. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's just another reminder of like, yep, that's what they dealt with the whole time.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, unable to resist his domination, she heads out to the dance floor with him, where his sexy moves place her fully under his power. And at the same time, Charlie's on the phone imploring Peter to help him. Peter's too terrified to do anything. Charlie tries to break the spell that Jerry has over by throwing a punch, but Jerry handles him easily, telling him to bring Peter to his house alone if he wants to save Amy. So now a couple of bouncers try to break up the action in the club and end up getting killed by Jerry, who goes half...
You recognize one of those bouncers?
Yes, but I don't know from where.
Yeah, because that's Ali from Friday 3.
Oh,
really?
Yes.
I never put that together.
It should have been in it more. Love that guy. Don't know why he only gets a cameo.
Yeah. He kills both of them, going half vampire mode. And in the chaotic rush to get out of the club, Charlie and Amy are separated. Jerry is there to grab her and bail. So he runs to Peter's house to beg for help, but he finds him getting ready to leave town. Begs for Peter's help, but he's too scared to do anything. So Charlie goes to Jerry's house alone. But Jerry, in the meantime, puts on a little sexy music. And Amy wakes up to find herself on a furry rug in a very sexy dress.
I feel, and I don't know if it's because in retrospect, we know that Amanda Bearse is a lesbian. And, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you watched her on Married with Children. But to try to sell her as a sexy character, it's a little bit of a hard sell.
I'm going to tell you what, there's supposed to be, this whole thing is sort of like she's like virginal, and this is sort of her maturing, evolving, kind of becoming a woman that they're trying to put across. It kind of works for me. Like I said, up to a point. At a certain point, it just, she becomes a part of the action.
I mean, I think what I said to Michael last night was, she was literally a replacement for Divine on Married with Children.
That's funny. I had no idea.
Wait, that's not the role Divine was supposed to play.
Well, Divine was supposed to be the neighbor.
Divine, and actually play a man, which was interesting. They were going to have Divine,
and then of course Divine died,
right.
And so they had to come up with something else. So they came up with this sort of Marcy Darcy.
But I do agree with you that all of it now that you say it, I can't stop thinking, oh my God, there was this sort of 11th hour draft. And of course, Tom Holland and people are never going to admit that there was a closed meeting where they said, this shit's too gay. Yeah. I mean that is exactly what happened.
It's kind of the peril of doing this podcast is like we watch these movies in much like we don't necessarily watch them so much as we examine them, and in the process of that we come to certain conclusions that like honestly we can really only speculate about, but that speculation makes a lot of sense when put in its proper context. And like we're seeing it here where it's on its own as a casual watch, this movie fucking rules. But when you really get into it and look at it at this sort of level of detail, it's like certain parts come across as very clunky.
Yeah.
But I think also, and we'll get to this at the conclusion of the episode. But the thing is, we were all there. We grew up then. It's like it's not like we didn't know that this was a homophobic time,
right?
Like, or misogynistic time. Like, it's not like this is a big surprise. And so I'm still able to look at this and say, yeah, I'm guessing this probably went before either, a sort of test audience or before studio executives. And they were like, no, we can't have this faggot shit in our movie. You have to prove that, by the end of the movie, this has a heteronormative conclusion. Yeah. I'm sure like heteronormativity was shoved in our fucking faces every day. It's why we have so much internalized homophobia, is because we were told it's okay if you're the queer best friend who dies tragically. It's not okay if you're the star of the story. That's why, like, I watch this stuff now and I'm like, yeah, of course that's the way it was. Like, I'm not deluded. It's not like, oh my God, this is a revelation. But it is still interesting to be like, I can still like these movies, even though I know that's the way it was. I know that's the way it was because I was there. Yeah, we were all there.
In this movie, like, I think we all agree, it succeeds despite it, and it's still likable. And I think part of that's just what all the actors bring. And I think Tom Holland, was very, very competent and a good filmmaker. But these parts of it do feel like someone said, you got to get this into the script. And, and I agree. I mean, what would be interesting is to know if they even, cast Amanda and there was a draft that was less, obnoxious. And they were like, nope, we need more. Nope, we need more.
Yeah, we need her more in your face.
She needs to be sexier. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between a movie that is sort of didactic in telling you, gay is bad. Right. Because God knows there's plenty of those. I mean, that is the bulk of the movies that involve sort of homosexual themes throughout the 80s. This movie doesn't do that. It's sort of neutral on what, how you're supposed to feel. Yeah. It's not going to tell you.
No, it's not sleepaway camp. It's not like where the entire premise hinges on, the discovery of, these gay fathers and, repressed, a forced trans kid, like that movie is the piece de resistance, but we know that movie is in some ways a ridiculous example of something that existed in more subtle ways in all movies, for better or worse.
But I think that also might be a little bit to its detriment in this case, because you do get that feeling that like this is somebody else's idea.
Right.
This is someone else coming in and saying, no, you have to make it this way. You have to tone this down. And again, there's that lack of vision where the director says, okay, fine, I'll do that. And it compromises the story in a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's why the Evil Ed character feels so undercooked is because there were probably versions of this movie that existed on page that had way, way, way more of him. But as the Amy character was introduced, she just kind of like that character sort of shoulders out all of that sort of Charlie and Ed stuff, which is why there's this kind of vaguely implied relationship between those two characters that seems to be a relic of an earlier version of the movie.
Yeah. And I mean, and Tom Holland has said as much. I mean, that there is his original draft of this was Peter Vincent, Charlie, and Ed. That was the three characters.
Yeah.
And so when they introduce this other character, they have to scale somebody back. And, probably because the character of Peter Vincent was written for a larger star, well, then who gets cut back? It's the sort of tertiary character.
Yeah. So again, under his power, Amy gives herself over to desire and Jerry bites her on the neck in the movie's replacement for a sex scene.
And I mean, this is the part of the story that I'm like, I kind of lose a little bit of interest where I'm like, I don't fucking care about this. Either give me monsters, give me, teens trying to kill the vampire, or like this weird, like, she's my long lost love. First of all, it is literally a plot line lifted from Dark Shadows. And it's also like, I don't care. This is boring and stupid.
Yeah. Oh, but you're about to get vampires and monsters and shit, because we are turning the corner into the...
they take us there.
Yeah, in the third act. So convinced that he's going to have to face Jerry alone, Charlie goes to Jerry's house, but he runs into Peter, who has changed his mind, gotten tough, and intends to destroy Jerry like a real vampire hunter. He also brings a massive box containing all of his vampire hunter props. Once inside, they find Jerry waiting for them. And Peter produces a cross, addressing him like a movie vampire, rolling his R's, to which Jerry laughs.
Wait, did you skip over the whole Evil Ed death scene?
No, that's coming up.
Okay.
So, Jerry, he crushes the cross, and he says that you have to have faith in the cross for that trick to work.
Which, again, is, I think, a nod to Salem's Lot.
Yeah. So he's about to kill Peter when Charlie charges forward with a cross of his own, but this one works and it drives Jerry back. And Charlie declares, "We're going to make it," just in time for Billy Cole to slide into the scene and knock him over the railing. So Peter once again flees, leaving Billy on his own, but he runs next door to get Charlie's mom, finding the phone lines cut. Up in her room, he thinks he finds her in bed asleep, but it's really Evil Ed wearing a red...
In one of the weirdest moments of 80s anything.
A red yarn wig like Raggedy Ann.
It's like, it's I guess it's sort of drag, but like...
It looks like a mop head.
Worst drag. Yeah, the worst drag they could have pulled off. Yeah.
This is like real lazy Halloween drag.
It's like drag on $10 at Spirit Halloween,
Yeah.
And so he demands to know where his mother is, and Ed informs her that she's working nights and
she left a note.
It seems his dinner is in the oven. Which is my favorite part of the entire movie.
Yeah, and that has always been my favorite part.
We have been doing that at each other for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here tonight discussing discussing this movie.
Yeah. They struggle a little bit. Peter's not.
And I mean, he looks great too. He looks like a fucking mess in this scene. Like, it's not just the wig is stupid, but like the makeup in this part is really cool because he looks gnarly.
Yeah, because like Jerry has the sort of monster form, but he has these like grades of vampire where sometimes he's just got fangs, and other times he looks like an animal. But like Evil Ed looks like a fucking monster,
and he's like deteriorating over the course of the film.
And so they struggle. Peter gets knocked out into the hallway, and now Ed emerges from the bedroom in a fucking awesome scene because he's now a wolf with red glowing eyes. And
I think this is where the sort of weirdness in tone comes in, because like, we have this moment where he pops up on the bed. He's got the kind of yarn wig on. It's really comical. And then it transitions nicely into something that is a little bit weird and a little bit menacing, but then it goes full on menacing, and it's like the transition doesn't quite work.
I mean, I suppose I don't.
The scene is cool as hell. I would not negate that, but like, it just feels a little bit weird to move from the goofy Raggedy Ann wig to an actual monster. Is like, okay, it's a hard turn.
It is a breakneck change of pace for sure. But he charges at Peter, who manages to run him through with a broken piece of the railing. He falls, down to the bottom floor, and so dying. The wolf.
This is an 18-hour makeup.
I know. I cannot imagine.
How do you even do that?
I would go insane if I had.
He had to sleep in the chair.
Yeah,
that is nightmarish.
Yeah, he gradually transforms back into Ed while Peter watches, and it's a really touching moment because like Ed is dying. He has this kind of moment where it's like, this has been all for naught, and at the same time, Peter Vincent is like, holy shit, I can actually do this. But seeing it and it
but
happen,
also there's a teenage boy dying
in front of him, and he's like wordlessly pleading with him. Like it's a fucking amazing moment. It's probably the best scene in the entire movie, like dramatically speaking.
Oh, I think it hands down. And because he conveys, Stephen Jeffries conveys so much just with his face
and under layers upon layers of makeup.
Yeah. And I think when you contextualize it too, sort of in retrospect, you have these sort of, two gay men doing this death scene in 1985 when, the images of gay men that you saw in 1985 were just harrowing and absolutely heartbreaking. Just look at the fucking Nan Golding photographs from that period. And like, I feel like it's hard to not think of that when you see this beautiful moment when it's like you have this older man who wants to help, realizes that this isn't what he thought it was going to be. And then you have a younger man who also realizes it's not what he thought it was going to be. It's just a very touching moment. Mm-hmm. And this is that scene where it's like, if we had a build up to this, if they had really let us have that relationship between either Charlie and Ed or, all three of them, this really would have been a remarkable moment in not just in horror film, I think just in film in general. But because it goes through so many iterations and so many revisions, we're just sort of left with this moment that is still beautiful, but feels a little bit flat.
It could have been better. I agree. But it is a remarkable moment in the entire movie. It's just so great.
I mean, it's deeply affecting no matter what they do, because I think the acting in this moment is really top notch.
Yeah. So up to this point, the special effects have been pretty light with a couple of like mild tricks, but from here on out, things are going to get effects heavy, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, you get the feeling they saved their money for this.
Yeah, so most of the crew in this movie was fresh off of Ghostbusters, and some of them worked with Rick Baker and Rob Bottin on their respective werewolf movies. So there's this.
Yeah, some of the effects are literally fresh off of Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah. But there's a one-upsmanship to Fright Night, where they want to do all of that transformation stuff in much greater detail. And also, these were the early days of special effects contact lenses. Oh. And there's a lot of contact lenses on the vampires at the end here.
This shit sounds rough. I mean, literally and figuratively.
I cannot imagine. So these are literally hard plastic shells. So maybe you're familiar with them, but nowadays, like special effects contact lenses are like the ones that people have been putting in their eyes since contact lenses began. They're soft, they're pliable, they're reasonably comfortable to wear.
So I guess for anyone who doesn't know, and I have worn glasses most of my life. If you put contacts in, you literally have to take the thing, get it on the tip of your finger, put it into your eye. You have to touch your eye, basically. Yeah. And back in the 80s, they were made of hard plastic.
Hard plastic shells that are placed over the eye and under the lids.
And so they would paint onto the lens whatever color or thick detail this was supposed to show. And in the case of Amanda Bierce, they painted them but forgot to sand down the other side that touches the eye. Yeah. So she puts these hard lenses into her eye, and it still has like flecks of whatever on the other side scratching her eye.
Yeah. Yep. You can only,
and they're all just like, whoops.
Yeah. They can only, oh shit. There is a moment with the dying werewolf scene where they have the it's all drooly and drippy and shit. And what they use for that saliva effect is something called methyl cellulose. It's like a thickener.
Oh God.
And what they did when they were doing with Jeffries in the dying werewolf scene is they were pouring this stuff on the eyes and in the mouth and shit as he's dying, and then he's inside the thing freaking out going like, what the fuck is this tastes terrible. And they're like,
spoiler alert, it's glue.
They were putting like the prosthetic glue in when they thought it was the methyl cellulose, and it glued his mouth half shut, and the only reason that it didn't all get up in his eyes and stuff is because they were pouring it on the glass eye section of the wolf. Good God, I cannot fucking imagine.
It's like the fucking Wild West.
Yeah. Also,
it's like when they made Creepshow and like the fluffy puppet like ripped off Tom Savini's hand.
there's parts in that documentary of some of the effects guys also getting like really badly hurt with
contact with noxious chemicals and like solvents and stuff like that, acids that burned them. Like the Jerry Dandridge death scene at the end sounds dangerous as fuck. And I'll get to that when we get there.
You just probably, I mean, comparing this all to the way movies are made today, or the way that, I mean, I hate to say it, but like just the way that younger people are, you just would never get away with it. I just read this thing about this background actor suing the producers of Maxine, including Ty West and Mia Goth, because of the, you know, the when you read the complaint and the lawsuit, you're kind of like, I mean, I'm gonna get canceled for saying this, but you're kind of like, you're just a fucking whiner, you know. Like horror movies are hard, you know. Like apparently Mia Goth kicked him or something, and it's like, I mean, and the blood, you know, was sticky and hard to get off his body, and I'm just like, maybe I should reread it. Maybe I have a feeling your listeners are gonna be like, Peaches Christ is a fucking monster, but part of me is kind of like, are you kidding? Like making movies is hard, you know?
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. And I'm about to be right there next to you. But like, I work on a show that is highly criticized a lot of times. Like I write for a true crime show.
Okay.
And so there's it's a precarious position, but like in this age of social media where people are so quick to just be like, well, how dare you? And it's like, do you realize that Boris Karloff would get like thrown down the fucking stairs day after day? And it's not okay that happened. But at the same time, it's like, hey man, this is fucking punk rock what we're doing. We're making horror movies.
Yeah.
And there's something about that cachet. And I don't want to advocate for like bad working conditions, but there is something about like, you know, just suck it up a little bit. Like you're doing a real cool fucking thing that nobody else gets to do. Like a handful of people get to do. Yeah. I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt or if you sprained an ankle, but like,
I mean, having made a horror movie myself with a lot of practical effects, I'll say that the actors and what you're describing in Fright Night is like a lot of people just don't give them the credit they deserve. Poor Mink Stoll in my movie, had to have her mouth sewn shut, and wear a prosthetic. The mouth sewing shut was actually stressful enough because to get it correct, we actually just had Natasha Lyonne stick a needle through Mink's lips, where it was like a fraction of if Natasha had hit the wrong mark slightly, it would have pierced her actual skin. So you can imagine me watching the monitor, and thinking, I mean, we don't want, all hell to break loose on the set. And Mink doesn't suffer fools, like she's been put through the ringer. She did not want her lip to be pierced. But despite that, which we succeeded in doing that, then we have 2 days where she has to sit on an attic floor with a prosthetic piece, on her mouth. So she can't talk. She can't eat. She can't drink water. Actors go through hell to make these movies.
Yeah. Let's name that movie because All About Evil is a hell of a movie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But
available from Severin Films on Blu-ray today.
That's right. Or if you get Shudder, you can watch it there. So.
No, stop it. Stop that. Make them go buy the DVD.
Oh, yeah. Go buy the Blu-ray. But sometimes I will say this for collectors, it's good to have it streaming because they'll watch it and then decide, oh, I need to own that,
Yeah. Yeah. No, but to get to the point of like the shit that people go through to make these movies, like I certainly appreciate that. I understand why visual effects are so prevalent today because they're cheap and it's easy and you don't have to clean up a blood spill constantly in between takes if you don't get it on the first shot. Like it's a fucking matter of like insurance, I'm sure also. But like I certainly appreciate a good, like a dangerous stunt or like a really elaborate physical effect because there's a craftsmanship to it, there's a skill to it, and there's a tangibility and a physicality to it that like these, the way that they're doing it now,
does not have, and it doesn't thrill me in the same way. So like,
I think that's a really interesting and good point. Is like, this isn't just about a badge of honor for doing something reckless. This is about, people trying to really push the boundaries with such limited budgets. I mean, these movies had no money ever.
Yeah.
And so you had people coming in like, let's be as fucking creative as possible. Now, it was a little bit reckless and sometimes a lot bit reckless, but like, this was not just people being like, whatever, I don't give a shit about this woman. Sometimes that did happen, Friday the 13th part 4, but there, for the most part, like, this is people really trying to stretch the limits of their craft and doing cool shit. And that is what horror was really kind of all about in the 80s, was like, it wasn't just that these were fun and fantastical stories. That was what they were, but it was that we saw new things and exciting things. And those things were not easy to do. And they were a little bit dangerous, and that made them even cooler. Yeah. And those people should really be honored for what they did and what they went through.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just like some weird outsider art where someone would nail themselves to a fucking car hood. Like, they were doing this for our entertainment because it was something that they really loved and believed in. I don't think that excuses a lot of the shit that happened, but I don't want it to always be dismissed as just like, these were reckless men, sort of trifling with the lives of women. Like, it just, I don't know. I think it gets dismissed too easily. Yeah. And I think we're at a point now where it's just like, well, just do it with CGI. And we're learning like, well, CGI doesn't do the same thing.
No. So back to the movie. Jerry now has Charlie captive, leaves him in the room with Amy, who quivers on the floor in the white dress. And he leaves him with a wooden stake, and after he leaves, Charlie discovers that Amy has been turned into a vampire. So, back at Charlie's house, Peter then retrieves the broken railing from Ed's dead body, and now, empowered with his ability to actually kill a vampire, heads over to Jerry's house, which is literally pouring fog. And he charges into the house, and he finds Charlie.
See, that's what I want my apartment to
do. Dude, the way that the fog is like just rolling down off the top of the house, and the way that it's lit from the top, it looks so cool. And so, yeah, I'm going to do that. Even though I'm connected to my neighbor's house in both directions, I'm just going to do it to my house. So he charges into the house. He finds Charlie there. And if they can kill Jerry before dawn, they can save Amy. So now they're confronted on the steps by Billy, who Peter shoots in the head. But this isn't enough to stop Billy, who suddenly sits up like Michael Myers at the end of Halloween.
I think this is a cool death. Like, this is a great death scene.
I love it.
I mean, I think it speaks to the idea that, like, you never really knew what this character was. Nobody in this movie knew what the point of Billy was or what he is, but it's a real cool death scene.
It's super gross. Because, so he struggles with Peter in a moment of vulnerability. Charlie runs him through with the board, and Jerry, that Jerry left him with to kill Amy. And then Billy, like, he melts. And also he's got a contact in that, like, after he gets shot, like his eyeball, like one eyeball turned hard to the left or something.
Yeah.
It's such a cool looking thing. But all of a sudden he's pouring slime like you can't do that on television. Just running out the bottom of his pants. And it's almost like the Nazis at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he kind of like is reduced to a skeleton that just like falls down the steps and just bursts into like a cloud of bones. It's a really great.
In what is a kind of a goofy shot, because the bones all kind of go tumbling down the stairs.
Yeah.
In the very 1950s way that I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. So now Amy is now worse, almost fully vamped out. Her hair is now long and red for some reason. And Jerry, meanwhile, calls to her to awaken from the rooftop, commanding her to kill Peter and Charlie. So back at the top of the steps, though, Jerry leaps through the window. And Peter, he produces the cross, which works this time, which stops Jerry, who is now stuck between the rising sun and the sign of the cross, which makes me wonder, did Peter Vincent find God in this moment? Was this a really...
I don't think anybody... I feel like at this point, they're just like, just wrap this shit up, everybody. We blew through our $8 million. Let's call it a day.
Yeah. So to escape, Jerry turns into a bat, and he attacks Peter, who drags him into the sunlight, and it causes Jerry to flee to the basement.
And so now
in all of this, so this ending is very. What year was Vamp? Was that 84?
86. So it was the next.
Okay.
It was the next year.
Because I feel like Vamp. The ending
Yep.
of Vamp is very reminiscent.
Very similar,
of
where
this.
like they kind of like they break that part, and then here comes the sun, and then they break that part, and here comes the sun, and now they're trapped between the beams of the light.
Yeah, it's very kind of video game-ish, where they're dodging the bursts of sunlight.
Yeah. So Charlie is in the basement, and he's confronted by Amy, who sort of confronts him with his weakness and his inability to save her. And vulnerable, totally fallen for it. She turns to attack Charlie, now with that gigantic shark's mouth. And I mean, we're watching this in 4K. It looks a little goofy. I still think it looks really cool. I still think it looks great. I think it's one of the cooler effects of the movie.
It's that wide giant grin that is so off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a statement too, and I've noticed it's like been sort of used symbolically, like being in the haunted attraction industry, I've seen a lot of masks and things that mimic that look. They're not necessarily Fright Night, but they're that crazy giant mouth, you know. And it was a fabulous new monster look.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I love it to death. Also, it seems to be on a hinge because like it moves a little bit, and every time I look at it, it's like, where is her actual jaw in this? Because like when it opens very wide. So it's a very cool. The prosthetic is really cool because it is blended so well that it doesn't feel like faces when you add that much shit to them can look a little puffy, and this doesn't. This looks like it's very well integrated into her face. It's the teeth look a little they're all snug.
The rest of it is real cool. Yeah.
So Peter, meanwhile, he finds the hidden compartment where Jerry keeps his coffin. He finds him sleeping there, scarred by the sun. Peter attempts to stake him, but Jerry is able to resist him. He does that thing like in Nosferatu where Count Orlok like rises up like on a hinge on his feet. And he throws the stake, which breaks one of the basement windows, letting a little sun in. So then Charlie takes to breaking all the windows, trapping Jerry, and ultimately setting fire to him. And so this effect is that super dangerous one that I was talking about before. So what they did was they placed over essentially a leftover dummy from Ghostbusters that didn't get used. And they put like flash paper with the printed image of Jerry's like vampire face over it. And then they soaked the model in glycerin and nitric acid.
Oof.
And then pumped.
That's never going anywhere good.
No, and then they pumped it full of sulfuric acid, which turns it into nitroglycerin. And so it combusts on contact. So
they made a bomb. They made a Jerry Dandridge bomb.
Yeah, which is why it has that sort of like eruption of green flame, and then he's like consumed. But it's such a cool fucking effect because it ultimately consumes the entire model. Like the entire model is reduced to smoke. Like there's
it sounds like they almost consumed the entire Disney backlot in Green's flame too.
Yeah, but it's a fucking hell of an effect. So now with Jerry dead and gone, reduced to literally nothing, Amy is saved and Jerry's house is back on the market.
Boo, Amy.
There you go.
Boo, heteronormativity.
So sometime later at Charlie's house, he's making out with Amy in his room while Fright Night plays on TV. Peter addresses Charlie directly and introduces an alien stalks the campground slasher movie, which is actually the movie Octoman, which is fucking terrible, but it's worth a watch.
So what I like about this moment, I hate the whole heteronormativity thing. Again, that feels shoehorned in. What I do kind of like is that throughout, one of the underlying themes of this is that it's that idea that these older movies are still relevant today. These older themes and these older stories are still relevant today. And by saying we're not going to do this, we're going to do this sort of newer style, it's blending those two things together. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is a nice conclusion to your idea that you can have these new 80s sort of hot new stories and still have these relevant characters and relevant themes. And then they just kind of fucking blow it at the end.
Yeah. Charlie goes to church.
Or just end on that.
I know
they
could have. Apparently, originally in this scene, the original scripted ending was Peter Vincent was bitten at some point, turned into a vampire, and he vamps out on TV. To which producers were like, "You can't fucking do that." Which
it's also the end of The Howling. So
yeah, that's true. But yeah, what he does is Charlie goes to shut the TV off, and he spots a pair of red eyes for a second in Jerry's former residence. And then they blink, and we hear Evil Ed say,
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster.
we fade to black, play that Jay Giles band theme song, and we roll credits.
God damn. God damn it.
Fright Night. Yeah.
Well, all right. So, Peaches, as I've alluded to several times, we revisit these movies to see how they still hold up today. And so I'm going to ask you first. We have talked a lot about this movie over the last 17 hours we've been talking. How do you feel that Fright Night works today in 2024?
Like I said, recently screened it for an audience, but I think part of why I like it so much is that it has less cringe than a lot of these nostalgia films do. And in that way, I really appreciate it. I think because of the post sort of release awareness around people like Amanda Bierce and Stephen Jeffries, it has more of a queer celebration than it ever intended to, because we've got Roddy McDowall, we've got Stephen, we've got Amanda, and then we've got a queer, subtext running through the whole film. So I think it's quite good, but I honestly, Dave, you've sold me on your criticisms. I think they're all fair and valid. And I agree that, we're sort of having to overlook some of the poor, basically script decisions more than anything,
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, in spite of the fact that, like, we've been very critical of it, and sort of like really sorting it out and finding the weak spots in it. But as a movie itself, I love it to death. This kind of like examination of it did nothing to sort of dissuade the notion that like this is an all-time favorite of mine. I love it to death.
I agree.
It is. There's a thing about like I really don't like falling for like naked nostalgia, but there is a quality to this that kind of reminds me of a very brief time in my childhood when a thing like Fright Night was actually like a thing. Like, we didn't have a horror host in our town, but we did have like a monster movie show on Saturday afternoons, and that was a major vector for discovering horror. It was all schlocky 50s stuff, but without,
I think it was a huge influence on both of us.
Yeah, like without the creature double feature, like I'm not this person that I am today, So like it really does kind of remind me of that, and sort of, I don't know, it feels like just out of reach. Like some part of me wishes that I could sort of recreate something like that, but this movie is as close as I get to it, and it's full of really great characters. It's got great performances. I do love the story to death. I don't know. I can't, like, apart from just like these very valid criticisms, I feel like it definitely stands on its own, and it's not diminished in any way for me.
I agree with all of that. I think that narratively there are problems, and I think that in terms of consistency and coherence, there's some meddling that I'm sure comes from the outside, but the tone of the movie is one of fun and sort of whimsy, and it is something that appreciates the past while still trying to be relevant in the present. And I think now, especially now that we know of the Amanda Bierce and Stephen Jeffries and Roddy McDowall, like all the queer influence, and the fact that it is being embraced again for those qualities, and the fact that everybody else that worked on the movie can look at it and say, hey, that's cool, I'm super happy. Like the fact that Tom Holland is just like, well, I didn't intend it, liar. But the fact that he's just sort of like, that's great too. It's like, you know what, that makes it feel good to me. Like, it feels good now that it's not like Nightmare 2 where he's like, well, I certainly didn't mean to do that. It's like, fuck you. Mm-hmm. Like, you get the feeling that it's just like when Tom Holland says, I'm so glad that people still love it and still find new things about it. And like that, I think that is the sign of a movie that lasts. That when we watched Black Christmas and Halloween recently, and it's like, every time I watch these movies, I find new things. That's the sign of something that is really has lasting quality. And, I would not put this movie against either of those two, but the fact that we can still watch it today and people can still find relevance in it, still find things to love and discover new things. And that the people who made it say, well, I didn't mean it for that, but I'm so glad you found it. And that's fantastic. That makes it all the better. And I think that, it's a little clumsy. It stumbles here and there. And there's some bits and pieces that maybe don't hold up so great, but the tone of it and everything underlying it is just so wonderful. I think it still works.
Yeah. Well, that I agree with both of you.
All right. Peaches Christ, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
You are very, very busy, and I would like you to tell everybody listening where they can find you and what you're up to.
Well, I'm on all the social media, although I did get off X when Mr. Musk I couldn't take it anymore. Not that Zuckerberg is much better, but Elon just was too much for me. So I'm off that, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok now. peacheschrist.com is where you can find me. The biggest thing I have coming up right now is Mink Stoll and I are going to go out and do our 2-person cabaret show in San Francisco, New York, Salem, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, Philadelphia,
go to that.
and Washington, D.C. So if you want dates and tickets, they're all up at peacheschrist.com.
All right. Dave, what are we doing next?
Well, this here show, Bring Me the Axe, we will be back in 2 weeks with a little film called X-Ray that I have discovered only but a year ago. It blew my goddamn mind apart into a million pieces. And we're going to be back. We're going to be talking with some other guests about it. I'm very excited about them. Please find it. It is on Tubi. It is the weirdest, wildest horror movie I've ever seen. But before then, we will be back in 1 week with a 99-cent rental where we're talking about Phantom of the Paradise, another movie I love.
Yes, this is going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait. So,
and that reminds me, I should have mentioned I also have a podcast called the Midnight Mass Podcast. So if you love these kinds of podcasts, you can check out our podcast. Your Phantom of the Paradise plug reminded me because we've done that movie as well. Yeah.
And I'm going to say it right up. I'm going to say it right now. I am a person who does not like a lot of things. I do not have a lot of tolerance for bullshit. And I will say Midnight Mass Podcast with Peaches Christ, Michael Verratti is one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you.
So do not miss it. If you never heard of it, look it up, find it. It is fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.